to again move from India to the Western world. But look at this virus. In 2 months, it's just conquered the whole world. The entire world has come to an absolute lockdown and taking lives at a very, very rapid pace. What you see here on the left is a chart which actually talks a little bit about how is the impact. Today, the global population that we have is about 8 billion. And of that, around 47.9, this is the data of, I think, 15th or 16th of May, is being impacted. There is a recovery. About 17 million people have recovered, which means that overall from the set of population that you have, about 5 to 6% of the people are impacted within just 2 months. And the struggle is we do not have a solution or a treatment to solve for this, which means we are living in a very, very real, fearful scenario, because this is going to increase and increase till we have a vaccine or a medication to stop this. And that's still a little distance away. What you see is also is the mortality. The mortality is around 3 million people, 3.15 million people who are no more there in this world. But look at how this pandemic has actually moved. It started off at Wuhan in China, moved to Iran, moved to Spain, to Italy, the whole of Europe, and then went into the US. And today the epicenter is the US. And US is supposed to be the superpower. And look the way they have been struggling. Their numbers, if you look at their numbers, they're at 17 million who are impacted. And that's not a small number for them. 90,000 people have died in the US. So it's the epicenter and they're struggling, which also reflects about some of the superpowers and their healthcare infrastructure or their readiness for to resolve this sort of a challenge that comes across all of a sudden from a blind spot. So they're not equipped to handle this sort of a situation. On the other side, if you look at India, how and where we are. Today, we are somewhere between 90,000 and 91,000 people who have been impacted. And of that impacted people, around 53, 54,000 people have actually recovered. So India's recovery rate is around 59.7%, 0.7%, as against the recovery rate globally around 36%. Does that mean that India's health infrastructure is superbly better than others? The answer is perhaps no. It is not about India's healthcare infrastructure which is actually reflecting this metric. It is more about, I think, Indians who are more immune to certain things. And I was actually going through an article published by John Hopkins where it suggests that because of malaria, and this subcontinent have been impacted with malaria. So there is now treatment and there is now vaccination and preventive measures that is there. That has actually helped to immunize a big set of Indian population. And this was more in a context where they were talking about the Dharavi slums in Mumbai and saying where somebody lives in a 10 by 10 sort of a kola and there are 10 or 11 people living there. And they're still not that badly impacted. The numbers in Dharavi is somewhere around 1,000 as of today, while Maharashtra has the largest number of COVID impacted in India. But still that Indian immunity has actually helped to manage some of this impact in the last 2.5 months that we have seen. India's first case got reported on 30th of January. So January to now we're in May, beginning of May. So about 4 months, we're about 90,000. What is also interesting to note about India is the rate at which it is doubling. That's another metric that one should be tracking and checking. Till about 10 days back, the metric was somewhere close to 12 days. India was doubling the numbers of impacted people. But in the last 7-8 days, it has gone down to somewhere between 10.5 to 11 sort of thing. So it's a little digression from the progress that was happening, which means today, if it is 90,000, in the next 11 days, this is going to be 1,80,000. And in the next 22 days, it is going to be 2,70,000. So that's the propensity at which it will actually be growing. So there is a significant impact on life because of the virus that is getting just spread across within the company. So India is a little better off globally, but I'll try to show you another screen where I will share a little bit about Where is that? Something is wrong. Perhaps I'm not able to pull out. I'll see that. This is more of BCG data that I had, which was actually running a John Hopkins data to suggest and predict as to which countries at what point of time will peak up. And it said India is going to spike up in sometime the third week of June. So we are still away from that peak point for India. While we see that some of the things are relaxing and we are starting to get to some sort of economic activity happening. And we'll come and talk about that a little bit. But if that is to be believed, then we are still not yet past the worst. The worst is still ahead of us. And we need to be immensely prepared to ensure how we overcome that sort of a situation. And the reason, the reason for the lockdown typically is for preparedness. Preparedness of your healthcare infrastructure readiness, preparedness for ensuring you have the right ventilators, counts across the entire country because you're not equipped with that. And finally, it's about how you administer, monitor, and govern all of this. I think that helps, that part of readiness is required to overcome through that lockdown. So we're still not there. That's one side. The second side of the lockdown is our economy or our economic activity has come to a standing halt. What I call the cash to cash cycle, which is I pull out some cash, go and source something, do a produce, then that produce goes to the market where somebody as a consumer comes in, procures that and pays me the cash back. So it starts off a cash and comes back as a cash. That entire cycle of source to pay or cash to cash is all gone and stopped. What is happening currently is whatever cash I had at the moment of lockdown when everything I had to stop as a business, as a unit, I have utilized that for my livelihood and my survival for this period of 45 days or 50 days that it's already in halt. And every set of individual will have a separate set of kitty to manage that. Some will be having kitty to survive for 1 day, 2 days. Some will have it for 7 days, some for a month, some for 5 months, some for 1 year, 2 years, that sort of thing. But everybody will have a limitation to hold on to this sort of a environment. And that makes this situation very, very critical. On one side, there is huge amount of threat on our lives. And on the other side, there is a threat on our economic activity, which means how does the cash comes to me for my own sustenance? There's a big challenge. I have put up some data up here, which is more talking about some of the estimates. And this is the real estate business is saying that this, and this is in the first 15 days. The impact for them is about 1 lakh crores in the first 15 days of just the halt. Similarly, the transporters are saying this is about 35,000 crores in the first 15 days because all the truckers, their trucks are stopped in various places, no movement happening. So how do we manage? And then of course, you have some numbers up there. The daily impact for India is about $4.5 billion. So we are in a very precarious situation. We are in a very, very precarious situation. And also if you look at India from a GDP standpoint, our numbers are somewhere around 2019 is about $11.4 trillion. And of that, if around 60 days get shaved off where no economic activity happens, you can well imagine the value and the size of that impact purely from a monetary term. What it means that while there are models, predictions, but nobody has a clue of how things are going to be. Nobody has a definitive answer to say this is how it will look like. Your stock markets have significantly gone down. So people's wealth have eroded significantly. So those are again impacts on every individual who has stay put invested. So their money is gone. And not necessarily these are indicators to a recession, but there is definitely a real risk of recession coming our way. Let's not have that preconceived notion that this is going to be a recessionary time go forward. I don't think so. When you look at recession, it's about looking at those curves. So typically you'll have 3 sets of curves. One could be a V curve, which is more, you go down significantly and then you again turn around really quick. And then you have the U curve, And lastly, you have the L curve where you go down and then you continue at that bottom, rock bottom sort of situation for a very long time. My belief is this is not going to be L, because this is not a war where bullets are fired and war is happening. And so it takes huge amount of time. This typically should be somewhere between a V or a U. I would more try to be optimistic and say this to be a V, because empirical data shows that whenever some of those pandemics have hit the world in the world has been able to recoup sooner than later. And hence my belief is that we should be more experiencing a V set of curve than in any of the other two that I just mentioned. So we do definitely have a problem. And if I have to sum up this, what does it mean? I mean, on one side, you have, there is life risk, and this is increasing and increasing. On the other side, you completely stalled. And now if you have to start your economic activity, there is a risk of COVID-19 2.0, because the moment you open up, everybody starts moving around. And this is so contagious that it could again impact you in the reverse way. And hence you have to go back to the same situation again and create even more disastrous sort of a situation for us. So it becomes a very, very catch-22 or a double-edged sword for us at this point of time. एक तरफ कुआं है तो दूसरी तरफ खाई है. And in that sort of a situation, you tend to think that the inevitable is pretty much there. It's pretty much written on the wall that it's perhaps getting to that end. But this is a situation where you need to stay put on the ground and understand what needs to happen. It's important to understand at this point of time, what is that thing that you need to look at? What you need to look at this point of time, when you know you're jammed, you can't step, you can't move back, and hence what do I do? Look at what you have as your resources. What are some of those things which works for you, and what are some of those things which may not work for you? And how do you utilize your strengths to overcome some of the challenges that you have? Our size of the population, 1.3 or 1.38 billion that we have today for India, that's a massive one. It's the second largest country from a population standpoint. That's one. The second is the density of population. While China is the top when it comes to population, they're about, I think, 1.4243 sort of billion people. But the density of population is even more challenging for India. We are 3 times more than China when it comes to density of population, about 460 people per square kilometer of people there. So it's very congested, and thus the risk of this getting transmitted across one person to another is so very much more. And hence our population size actually tends to become a little disadvantage for us. Second is our current health infrastructure that we have. All of us know how our health infrastructure is, and there is a potential chance to actually bump up this significantly. But in our current environment, we have fully capacitized our infrastructure, but still that is not hardly enough to service the impact that is happening on people. So there are transit makeshift sort of COVID hospitals, COVID beds, COVID environments to treat people, but are they really addressing the way it should have been addressed? So we do have that challenge in hand. And lastly, the MSMEs, which is your micro, small and medium enterprises, they contribute to about 60-65% of India's GDP. So they are your lifeline. And this lifeline has come to a standing halt. How do you churn that? How do you crank their engines back? Is definitely a challenge. On the other side, your demography is an advantage for you. And so is this market. The 1.38 billion people that you have today is actually your consumers. So they are the consumers for all the produces that happens in the country. And that's a massive market. That's a massive market. So India does not have to rely typically on exports to get revenues. They have their own consumption, which is so high because of the set of population that it has, that any production that happens, any supply that happens, it has the appetite to consume. So that's a big, big, big positive for India, which perhaps many of the Western worlds are not there at all. And that's where India's strength lies. And the second is the demographics. If you look at India's 1.38 billion, 65% of his population is young, within that 35 age bracket. 50% is below 25. So you have a huge amount of workforce who is passionate, energetic, willing to go all ahead. And on the other side, you have a huge market which you can tap into to strive for business. That's where our situation is. And how do you now convert your real-time strengths into opportunities? And how do you build from here? Rather than cribbing and crying that, oh, things can't happen. Oh, we are so infrastructurally challenged from healthcare. Oh, we have such a large population. How do we fail growth? How do we fund things? There is also a position you can do that. But if you're pragmatic and holistic, you'll have to convert this situation into an opportunity for you. And how do you do that? That's where the resilient Indian story comes into play. So in this sort of a scenario where you have threat on lives are at risk, on the other side, your economy is stalling, how do you work here? And when you have to do that, it's about striking that right balance between saving life and also ensuring the livelihoods are working and running. It's to strike that right balance. While it's very easy to say that to strike the right balance, but it is one of the toughest and hardest part. And for us as citizens, as good, solid citizens of this country, it's very important to stay disciplined. Perhaps that's not there culturally in us. We are a little airy-fairy and floaty when it comes to discipline. And we tend to meander ways to make our ways and make things happen for us. But I think it's very important for us as citizens to be very, very disciplined and conscious about that. So when there are social distancing norms that's there, it's very important for us as individuals to ensure that, rather than jumping in and saying everything is normal and let me rush through. And this has happened in the past about 10, 12 days when all these liquor shops opened up and some of the markets opened up, people just rushed because culturally we have the tendency of hoarding. And that's not right. You don't need to. You have enough essentials that supply is coming. And some of these things are not essentials, but you still tend to hoard it for your convenience. And those are some of those disciplines and behaviors that we need to bring our lifestyle to. And I say this because you are young, you're students, and you are the future. And you need to inculcate this and demonstrate this more in the larger world that you operate around. It's so very important. So ensure that some of these things happen, because it's not going to be easy to strike the right balance. Imagine a local train in Mumbai, how it operates. The people doesn't have a space to just hang in there. That sort of an environment, people keep traveling for their livelihood. And now we are saying we need to have decent space, which means all of us has to be respectful. So there is a new norm of new way of working that will come into place, and we'll have to respect that. And change is very difficult. For all of us to change is very difficult. If I go to a hotel and sleep on a bed and the pillow changes, I have a not very pleasant sleep because my pillow that I'm used to sleep at home is not there, and hence I struggle. Those things are there. So we'll have to embrace some of these changes and be more disciplined. The second thing that comes into play is, because your MSMEs are starved today, starved because they don't have the funds to again churn on the supply cycle, it's important to provide liquidity. There has to be enough liquidity in the market. And when I say liquidity in the market, it does not mean that the authorities or the government needs to actually borrow in money and just put it in the market. It's about within the existing framework, how are you playing within your framework to allow your CRRs to go down, your SLRs to be utilized, your repo rates to be utilized, to actually allow more liquidity in the market space. That will bring in liquidity, which the banks then can utilize to service this segment of people. When I say banks, banks are nervous about lending. While they may get liquidity, but they are nervous about lending because what happens to my security? There is uncertainty. What is the collateral that will come in? And hence, how do I finance? Those questions will ticker in a banker's mind. But reality is, at this point of time, because of your customer experience and relationship with the customer, you know the customer so very well as a bank, it's time to actually lend that without even securities. And the government should come in to say, I will back for that security. I will stand guarantee. When the sovereign guarantee comes into the bank, see how the banks transform themselves and move forward to actually bring in that liquidity and deploy, because banks are actually your distribution channels to take it to the end user. While governments might change those frameworks to adjust and provide liquidity, but it is the delivery channel, and the delivery channel is your banks, which will actually go and deploy it to those end users, which is your MSMEs and the companies who are doing businesses, small businesses. And if they start doing that, the credit line breakdown will not happen. Because if the credit line breakdown happens, there is huge amount of potential job losses that could happen because of liquidity crunch. When an SME does not have the money to source their raw material and produce, they will definitely look at ways to cut out cost. And when they start looking at cutting out cost, jobs are one thing that they'll tend to say, because they say, I'm not able to produce, so why do I need 100 people? Let me do with just 10 people to manage my whatever produce I am doing. And hence there will be a huge amount of job loss. So liquidity comes in the marketplace as one big differentiator to actually ease it out to cranking. Once that happens, you will see the supply sides starting to churn, starting to crank. But still you have a challenge, your demand side. The demand side is still a challenge because of this environment. Today, as an individual, many of us who are invested see our investments going down. So my wealth has depleted, my cash has depleted, because just the markets have behaved in that fashion. So I have that limited amount of cash. Secondly, if I'm working or in business, I'm nervous about the environment, and hence I'm not sure, should I splurge or should I not buy? Should I buy? Should I not buy? Should I hold on to the money that I have and let go some of those desires that I have? And hence consumer confidence is low on going out and spending. Example, a restaurant is again part of this SME bucket. They get liquidity and they start sourcing and they are ready to serve, but they don't see customers coming in or consumers coming in. Imagine the plight. On one side, you have readied your supply, but there is no taker for the end product or services. What do you do? So you again have those challenges. So it's very important to bring that demand back in place. And to get that demand back into place, it's a little longish curve, but there are certain mechanics. I mean, if the environment starts reflecting that things are getting normal, or job losses are not happening, the supply side is starting to crank, the consumer's confidence will start to tend to grow up. But will the productions happen at 100%? The answer is no, because if you look at industries, if you look at the manufacturing, heavy manufacturing ones, car manufacturers, steel manufacturers, they will not operate at 100%, because again, you'll have to ramp up in a gradual way. So as you ramp up gradually, your consumer confidence will ramp up at a slower pace, but will definitely ramp up. So the curve to win the consumer confidence will be a longer one than getting to a normal supply curve. So a demand focused approach, a supply focused approach, by bringing in and infusing more liquidity into the market, will actually help the Indian economy to actually bounce back. That's one part of it. That's not the end. The second part of this is, because of this impact, there are a lot of global manufacturers who have set up their manufacturing units in China. And they are, as part of their risk mitigation plan, feels that they have concentrated their risk into one country, one area, by creating their manufacturing hubs there, while they're supplying globally from that manufacturing hub, but they are limited to that. If that hub goes off, then their supply chains completely shackles and breaks. So they want to have multiple hubs now as manufacturing hubs instead of one, to ensure that their supply chain is constantly cranking. And that's where India comes into play as a potential opportunity, along with Vietnam and I think along with Vietnam as a potential competitor to this. So what it means for India is, at a very, very rapid pace, has to set up its infrastructure, which is so much more conducive to run manufacturing units. Today, if you look at our labor laws, our land laws are horrendous. It's very, very ancient. It's not at all business savvy. there is no one single window through which it's easy to get these approvals. Even if I want to set up a manufacturing unit, for me to get that, I have to go through multiple channels, multiple sources, multiple departments to actually get it. And that makes the process so much. So on a capacity, I have to devote 60 to 70% of my capacity in trying to get an approval, and I have only remaining 30% to start working on the business, which should not be the case. And I'll give you an example. I'm not naming the company, but this is a car manufacturing company who set up an operation, wanted to set up a manufacturing unit in China. They were able to do all of this end to end, right from signing up the memorandum to actually producing the first car in 15 months. And the same company, when it set up its operations for manufacturing cars in a state in western part of India, which is supposed to be one of the very user-friendly and investor-friendly and manufacturing-friendly state, took 7 years for that company to actually produce their first car out of that plant. That's the difference. So India has a massive path to cover. So 15 months versus a 7 year. So you have to change your legal system. You have to change your land rules and regulations. You have to change your labor laws. They're all ancient, because no industry would like to engage with labor hassles and labor troubles. They would like to do, come, I pay you, here's your condition, here's what we will produce, production goes out, it gets supplied. It's a simple way of doing business, rather than having those multiple nuances and nodal points to actually try to manage doing that business. I think that's the second thing India needs to significantly focus, and focus that at a very accelerated pace. The third thing is, with COVID coming in, the new norms. I mean, all of us, you can see we are now all virtual and we are talking to each other. In a normal situation, this should have been in your auditorium and then somebody coming and talking and addressing, and there are listeners. But today is the whole world who's participating in this sort of conferences and sessions. So it's a new norm that is setting up. And in this new norm, there is a digital economy that is coming into play. This digital economy in India needs to accelerate. Today, if I just call out and throw you some numbers on, any guesses on what is India's, say, internet usage? So you have a population of, say, 1.3 billion. What percentage of that actually uses internet? Anybody? Just throw a ballpark number. There's nothing right or a wrong answer, but just throw a ballpark number, just your estimates of how you see.
Students can raise hand if they want to answer this. We've muted everybody actually.
Yeah, I don't want to put anybody in the spot, but it's just more for fun, nothing more than that.
Anybody wants to raise hand and answer this, please?
Okay, I'll give it up. No pressures.
Yeah.
So it's about 23%, 23.8% of the Indians have access to internet. But when we move around in our locality, in our place, our assumption is, "Arey, sabke paas to internet hoga, arey phone pe to sabke paas hai, kaun si badi baat hai, hoga nahi." But reality is, and this is a sample survey, national sample survey of 2018. So it's not that very old data that I'm sharing with you. It's just 23%. And of the rural population, which is 66% in India, of that 1.33 or 38 billion people, just 14% has internet. 14% of the rural population has internet connectivity. Some more statistics. There are 16% women who use mobile data, as compared to 36% who are men who use mobile data. In India, there are about 350 students like you are there. And guess what is the percentage of people who use internet? Just 12.5%. We all living in cities will feel we are all 100% all internet savvy and internet enabled. But the reality is very, very different than what it is. So India has a potential opportunity to accelerate and create that infrastructure across the country so that people are digital enabled. Let me put it that way. They are digital enabled. The second part is, how do you embrace some of these technologies back into you? I said, you have a population which is very young. So their ability to embrace and grasp this and grab with this and run with this is so much more than somebody. You can see in your homes, when you talk to your parents and things and tell them to do a WhatsApp or do this, attach this or send that or join this conference, they will struggle a little bit, fumble a little bit, because of the fear. So somewhere that fear has to go away from people's mind, that this is more usable. And then the willingness to do in this fashion is very important. So I think there is a potential opportunity for India to actually support and sponsor this gig economy, because this is going to be big. In today, because of COVID, there are certain industries who's taking a massive hit. Look at the travel industry. Look at the retail businesses. The brick and mortar stores are going to go away because people would be nervous to step into a store in this sort of an environment. And hence, what does their business happen? They have to get into their e-mart. They have to communicate with their customers. How do they communicate with their customers and engage? They have to create digital channels to do that. That's so very important. Thus, India has to provide that infrastructure, and the Indian businesses have to quickly embrace some of these things. And the way we move to work from home, I mean, even in our organizations and things in our industry, there was always a customer compliance which actually stopped us from moving from work, because there is a data privacy and data security and things like that. But the moment this happened, the way everybody came together to actually, let's do this. The government came in to say, okay, for SEZ, these are exempted for this time. So you're able to take all your assets out to deploy it to individuals' home. The clients came back to say, we will adopt to some of these new technologies to control privacy and data security. That happened. And then the logistics of moving all of this to people to enable them to work from home. And today it's so much normal way of doing things. Today I'm doing conferences around the world where my teams are around the world, but I talk to them just using Microsoft Teams or Zoom, like what we are doing today. And the emotional connect is there. You're able to share what you want to do, but it's a change. It takes a little time, but it's important to embrace to that. And lastly, I think it's about skilling. Today, as things progress, the skilling has to change. To my mind, with some of these digital interventions coming, the rule-based, repeatable, straight-through processes or way of working will go away. Technology will take some of those parts. Humans will, if I try to generalize, will now be more needed to do more insightful thinking to execute their work. And second, they have to embrace certain softer aspects, which is about how do you collaborate? How do you bring in empathy? How do you learn to work together? Because today, if you look at performance management, performance is about you are given a 5 set of things, you achieve them, you're a super performer, or you overachieve them, you're a super performer. But that's not going to happen anymore. It will be about units, businesses, groups, how they achieve together the goals. That's where it will be. It is heading. So ability to collaborate, to work together, to win together is something that is coming our way. And for you students, I think in India, the way our education system is and structured, we are very boxed, because I have an exam, I have these many chapters, so questions will come, I will clear them by learning this, and that's it. But if you have to ready yourself for future and the skills that is coming, it's more about experiential learning. It's more about being observant to things. So as you move out and go around, meet with your friends, interact in the market space, it's important to see how customers are behaving. Where are the gaps? That helps you to think differently when you actually get into workplace to understand how can I create a solution. So you will have to wear your entrepreneurial hat as you try to do things. So you'll have to move away from just reading your textbooks. It's important to read the textbooks. I don't say it's not, but simultaneously, your experiential learning is going to play a big role in who you are, what you are over time. That will differentiate you from others. So as a country, I think we are great executioners. If we are told to do a task A, B, C, we do that very meticulously. But if we are asked to think about it and do it, we struggle, because we do not promote innovation as a culture in our way of working. So it's important for you to step back, reflect, think as you try to do things. And that skill is becoming so very relevant in businesses, because environment is changing, market is competitive. How do you create a differentiator to engage with your customers and increase your customer experience to a level where the customer never will leave you and go? That's what you need to do. And to do that, skilling becomes a key component for India's resilience. And when I say this resilience, it's not about this next 2 months. It's a journey from 2 to 3 years sort of journey that India has to do to actually, the liquidity part is more immediate in the next 3 to 6 months that needs to be injected. But the rest of the things has to happen in the next 2 to 3 years. Because if this doesn't happen, I think we will always continue to be in that catch-up game. We will not be that leader that we try to visualize ourselves and dream ourselves and aspire to be in as a nation, as a country. We will always try to catch up. And that will not be a good scenario. And for that, you need leadership. Leadership which is genuine. It is irrespective of the biases that we have within the country. India, as you know, is a very diverse country, culturally, religious, casteism, everything. So we are very diverse. But that diversity should not be a showstopper. It should be, on the contrary, be uniting together to actually deliver. So you have to remove all your biases and do what is right for that country. And again, communication, confidence, empathy, these are a couple of things that has to come in from leadership, not just once, but multiple times at multiple forums to demonstrate that this is what we are doing. So that's very important for India to be bouncing back and trying to get over this. But that doesn't still solve the problem for us, because you know, this was a one-off experience that we had. And in this sort of experience, our readiness, and I'm not saying just India, but globally, I think everybody was underprepared or not prepared at all. And it just struck us, and we had to take it on our chin and then move on with the learnings. And to me, some of the things that is important to create a foolproof sort of environment, so that if this sort of things happen and we come across, it doesn't destabilize us, it doesn't get us to this sort of lockdown environment and situations, because we have that much of robustness built into our overall framework. I think one of the things that I think very, very strongly, the world body, which is World Health Organization, today it's being sponsored, but by countries, but it's more an advisory body. But I think the transformation that needs to happen with the World Health Organization, to me, and this is more my personal view, is that they become more, they're empowered and funded adequately to take decisions and make decisions globally. Because what is happening today in this pandemic environment, while we are global and we say this is a global village, but in reality, as you see the experience of different countries, they're only thinking about their country. Nobody is talking globally to put together all the minds to say, what has been my learning, what is your learning, what has been my failure, what is your learning. That sort of a culture is not happening at this point of time. And World Health Organization has that potential opportunity to be that player, to actually facilitate and bring in everything. And then they take their decisions across the globe, which is fairly consistent. And countries need to comply to those standards. I think you bring in that much of empowerment to World Health Organization. That's going to help in building the right framework, because they are the most experts. They have done multiple researches across the globe, understand the context globally, and hence they should be empowered to take some of those things. As I said, there is a growing feeling that we need to de-link from this globalization, because had we not been globalized, Corona would not have hit India in 2 weeks or 3 weeks time, or 2 months, we wouldn't have been in this situation. Or US would be saying that had we not globalized, had we closed our borders, we will all be fine. But I think this is a time where there is more need for globalization. The global community needs to come together to solve for this problem globally. This is not a country-specific problem. Pandemics are global problems. What is the difference between an epidemic and a pandemic is epidemics are more local and regional, and hence many times ability of understanding between the two is a little gray, and hence people tend to think this is not me, this is it. But pandemic is global. Global communities need to come together to share data, to share information, to share experiences, because that's going to pull out some of those control points that you need to have. The third thing is about the infrastructure. I think some of the advanced countries do have some of these infrastructures, but they were not tested. And when it came to testing, they failed. In India, I don't think we have those infrastructures. So it's important that we set up some of those infrastructures. The infrastructure for the health framework has to have elements of prevention, has to have elements of how you detect, then is once it is detected, how you respond. So to look at the COVID situation today, we have detected I'm COVID, but it took so much time for us to detect because the testing was not available. The kits for testing and things, we were not equipped to do that. So hence our ability to detect and then to take action was limited. And that took time for us to actually procure those testing things because we are not prepared. So detect and response becomes very critical. Because unless you detect, you can't respond, and the speed of response has to be there. And finally, it's about your healthcare system, how you build your healthcare infrastructure. Healthcare infrastructure is not just about creating hospitals and beds, but it's also about the primary. If you look at India, 66% of the people are rural. And if they are impacted, it's only a matter of few weeks when it will come into the urban areas. And hence it's important to actually address the problem up there, be it the problem of poverty, be it the problem of water, be it the problem of basic primary health or setup that needs to happen. It's not there. So your infrastructure, health infrastructure needs to be fairly structured. And lastly, compliance. And when I say compliance, it's about the standards that the international authorities have put in as part of your health framework. Not necessarily every country is complying to that. And there is no measures and checks or any penalties associated with failure to those compliance. Like if you look at an airline, there is an international body which governs to say, what is your safety standards? And any airline which is not able to maintain those standards, they will be immediately grounded, and there is a penal consequences of that. But that is not there in healthcare. But both of them have the same outcome, is safety of human being and human lives. But in airline, it's followed with huge amount of integrity and huge amount of dedication and discipline, but in the healthcare segment, it's not. So that needs to come in. And last is, this is where technology plays, is health surveillance. So many of you will have your armbands, which talks about your heart rate, pulse rate, how many steps you've taken and exercise and things. So we are getting into an era of surveillance, health surveillance. So you will be monitored. The government of India has come up with this app. Many people will argue this. Arogya Setu could argue this is about privacy versus this is about certain things. But you will get into that digital sort of environment where your health would be checked through a digital way, and that data will go to some central pooling through which it will constantly keep mapping as to who is exposed to what sort of risk from health, and then bring in solutions and interventions to actually help solve for that. That's how, if you bring all of this together and pull all of this and stitch all of this together, I think we have a fairly broad framework to create a good blueprint for future so that we are more aversive to some of these impacts that has hit us currently. With that, I will pause and wait for questions, conversations that you may have. I'm not sure whether I took too much of time or I didn't check on the time. I hope we are on time. Any questions?
Participants, if you have any question, please use the raise hand option. And in case there is a connectivity issue on your end, you can drop the question in the chat box. Please use the raise hand option if you have a question to ask.
Hello. Hello.
Yeah, Dr. Shanti, yes.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you that now the travel will start.
Yeah.
The travel by air will start soon.
Yeah.
And if it is international tour or international travel, what would be the situation? Because it's going to be really disastrous.
True, yeah, this is more a medical practitioner's question, but I'll basis my experience. I'll try to answer that. And see, yeah, so I think travel is going to open up. It's a matter of time, maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. I think some will start opening up, be it domestic travel or airline travel, international travel. I don't think that there was some saying in the market space where alternative seats will be allocated and one seat will go empty. Because if that's the model, perhaps the airlines will not be able to sustain, because the cost of running a flight versus the revenue that they get for that particular flight, it will not be reaching that break even. So that will not happen. So I think they will operate at full capacity with the same seating sort of arrangements. What will change perhaps is the preventions that will happen. I would think that you will have a longer check-in time. Today, if it was 1 hour before you needed to reach for a domestic flight, it will be much longer because there will be a social distancing through which that will happen. I think there will be more online automated check-in facilities where your interface with human being will be very limited. It will be more touch or not even touch. It's more about QR code, just showing your phone, the QR code for your boarding pass is there. You show it in a kiosk and then it'll just print your boarding pass and then you go through. Same will happen with your baggages, where I think there are ultraviolet sanitization devices that has been put in to scan and sanitize your baggages that goes through the belt. Some of these things will come into play as part of prevention, but I don't think it's going to be. And then there are also talks of having people wear these PPE suits, which is more the medical practitioners that wear when you're traveling in airline. That could also come as a norm, but this is more a speculation as thinking at this point of time, but this is no foolproof rule. Similarly, I think for international travel also, the risk might be a little more because different countries will adopt different norms and there could be some quarantine period as you land in. So those are some risks there, but I think just the flight experience will change from more being manual to more electronic and digital, which is touchless sort of engagement that will happen. So I'm not sure if it answers your question, but
no,
that's my thinking on this.
This one I just wanted to know, because what happens if it's going to be 50% travelers in a particular flight, and the cost of the travel would increase.
Yeah, so that's the business model, because that's the airline will run in routes where they think they will be operating at 100%, because if they operate on a route at 50%, they'll not be able to sustain. So initially, maybe for some time in some routes, people, because they are scared, will not be flying or moving around. But as things tend to get into more customer confidence growing up, I think that will increase. But I'll also tell you an interesting comment that came up, and I read this very recently in Financial Times. This is Brian Chesky, who's the CEO for Airbnb. I'm not sure. Airbnb is pretty much like what you have Oyo in India. So Oyo replicated that model. So it's about hotels at a very cheap rate that they provide. It's a platform. It's a digital platform. And he says that today it was more of business travel and on-screen entertainment. But go forward, it will be on-screen work and more of leisure travel. So his view was, and that's a very bold comment that he made actually, his view was that because of this, we'll see business travel reducing significantly. So our hotels and things for business purposes would be minimized, uses would be minimized, but we would see travelers coming in for leisure travels and spending some time would happen. Perhaps not may happen now, but would happen more. So we'll have to see how things shape up. I think there is no definitive answer, Dr. Shanti, to say this will happen or that will happen.
Because what happened, the government of Goa has given the duty to the teachers, the college teachers, to go for economic survey. Mm-hmm. So we were given one particular panchayat, and when we were discussing with the members of the panchayat, mm-hmm. they were, because Goa is known for tourism. Yeah, so yeah. Next another 6 to 8 months, completely it has come to it will come to standstill.
Yeah.
So there is no plan B with them.
Yeah. See, with the travel industry, that's what is there. But if you see, virtual reality is one thing which is going to shape up. which means there would be virtual tours where the local guy up there will actually do a tour for you and you could digitally experience it. These are little distance away, but I think these are potential things through which they will try to garner some revenue for the state. So they are building some of those infrastructure for themselves to overcome some of these challenges. But you're right. I think for the next 6-8 months, it will be challenging for them.
Because everything has come to standstill, whether it is the fishing, because there is no
Absolutely.
one to buy, and the interstate, it is completely, it is blocked. And when they want to go for farming, the land is saline water, so they cannot go for farming. So the way they were on top level through tourism, they have come to like beggars. Literally, the taxi drivers are selling fish and the vegetables. How long will they do it?
True. And I think, even the farmers, they have their farms ready, but they're not able to deploy to the market from where it'll get to the wholesalers and then to the retailers. But now as we see us to be opening up a little bit, some of these infrastructures will come into place, but those all will happen in a controlled way. Never be like what it was in the past, but there will be some opening up that happens in a very, very controlled way. And that's where I think that discipline comes into play for all of us, be it the supplier, the consumer, whosoever it is, to ensure that they walk this journey fairly tightly and in a disciplined way.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Shanti.
Okay, next question is from Prashant Verma. Please ask your question.
सर मेरा एक ऐसे क्वेश्चन था कि मतलब जैसे गवर्नमेंट सारी ये कह रही है कि आपको थोड़ी सी इकोनॉमी को खोल देना चाहिए कि हाँ आपको इकोनॉमी खोल देनी चाहिए ताकि मतलब इकोनॉमिक एक्टिविटीज कंट्री के अंदर हो सके थोड़ी बहुत ही। लेकिन सर अगर हम ये चीज देखें कि जो लोग हैं वो इससे बहुत ज्यादा डर गए कोरोना से, तो वो ज्यादा बाहर नहीं आना चाह रहे हैं ना वो, और जैसे ही कंट्री खुलेगी वैसे ही डिप्रेशन का टाइम आएगा पूरी इकोनॉमी के लिए। तो सर इस केस में जैसे लोग बाहर इन्वेस्टमेंट भी नहीं करना चाह रहे, बाहर ज्यादा घूमना भी नहीं चाह रहे हैं, तो क्या हैंड पंप इन्वेस्टमेंट जो है वो क्या हेल्प कर पाएगी इकोनॉमी को इस तरह उभारने में, इससे पेंडेमिक से बाहर? और मतलब
प्रशांत, आपके लास्ट पार्ट में क्या इकोनॉमी आपने बोला? क्या बोला?
हैंड पंप इन्वेस्टमेंट सर, केंजियन इन्वेस्टमेंट।
ओके सो या देखो, आई थिंक चैलेंज तो है, इट्स नो डाउट दैट देयर इज नो चैलेंज। इट्स ऑलवेज देयर विल बी अ सेट ऑफ पीपल हु विल से, जो बोलेंगे कि खोलना नहीं चाहिए, बंद करके रख देना चाहिए, लाइफ इज मोर इम्पोर्टेंट देन एनीथिंग एल्स, और अगर जान रहा तो जहान रहेगा। So some school will believe in that, and then some will say no, I think it's important to also open up livelihood, because अगर livelihood नहीं रहा तो जान नहीं रहेगा. So there are different school of thoughts जो है. In that sort of a scenario, I think a balanced approach बहुत important है. A balanced approach में आपको जान का भी ख्याल रखना है, आपको livelihood का भी ख्याल रखना है, मतलब business को भी थोड़ा बहुत चालू करना पड़ेगा और उसके लिए control way में करना पड़ेगा, right? That said, जो आपका point है कि लोग डरे हुए हैं, जरूर डरे हुए हैं, एब्सोल्युटली, बट आई थिंक हमें ये आदत डालना पड़ेगा कि ये कोरोना वायरस अभी 2 महीने 1 महीने में नहीं जाने वाला, ये कोरोना वायरस अभी कुछ टाइम के लिए चलेगा। इसको साथ में लेके कैसे हम स्वस्थ रह सकते हैं और चल सकते हैं वो सोचना पड़ेगा, और वो तैयारी हमें मन में करना पड़ेगा। बिकॉज अगर हम डर के अंदर ही घर के अंदर बैठे रहें और सोचे कि मेरे को वायरस अटैक हो जाएगा, तो शायद चलेगा नहीं, क्योंकि ये वायरस जाने वाला नहीं है अभी बहुत इमीडिएट टाइम में।
सर एक और क्वेश्चन था एक्चुअली, जैसे हम तो अपनी सर्विसेज हैं, हम एज ए स्टूडेंट हम ऑनलाइन पढ़ सकते हैं, बैंक की सर्विसेज हैं वो एम्प्लॉयज घर से परफॉर्म कर सकते हैं, लेकिन ये जो रिक्शा वालाज हैं या फिर जो वर्कर्स हैं ये तो अपनी सर्विसेज को घर से नहीं दे सकते। अगर हम लॉन्ग टर्म का देखें, अगर सरकार कर भी रही है तो फिर भी सरकार इन्हें टोटली हेल्प नहीं कर सकती लॉन्ग टर्म में, क्योंकि एक हिसाब से रिजर्व भी होते हैं। अगर वो सारे के सारे रिजर्व्स को इसके अंदर ही लगा देगी तो फिर कंट्री को पेंडेमिक से उभारना बहुत मुश्किल हो जाएगा। लेकिन अगर आपने इन्हें नहीं दिए तो फिर और बड़ी दिक्कत आ जाएगी कंट्री पे, क्योंकि लोगों के पास खाने के लिए कुछ नहीं होगा, वो फिर सड़कों पे निकलेंगे कि हमें काम दो हमें, वो दो। तो सर इस चीज को कैसे tackle
इस चीज के लिए भी सरकार ने, अगर आप देखोगे, डायरेक्ट बैंक ट्रांसफर बोल के एक इनिशिएटिव है जिसके थ्रू सरकार ने सब एक क्लास ऑफ पीपल है जो सरकार के डेटाबेस में है, जिनका इकोनॉमिक इनकम इतना एक लेवल पे है, उस लेवल के नीचे सबको डायरेक्ट बैंक ट्रांसफर करा गया, जिसमें उनको अकाउंट में कुछ पैसे आए। दे विल डू दिस ऑन अ मंथली बेसिस फॉर द नेक्स्ट फ्यू मंथ्स, जो कि गवर्नमेंट का अश्योरेंस है। ऑन द ग्राउंड कितना इम्प्लीमेंट होता है, दैट्स आई कांट कमेंट ऑन दैट, बट दैट्स व्हाट दे आर डूइंग। सेकेंडली, ये जो लोअर स्ट्रेटा ऑफ द जो माइग्रेंट लेबरर्स है, रिक्शा पुलर्स है, ऑटो रिक्शाज हैं, टैक्सी ड्राइवर्स हैं, इनके लिए दे हैव नाउ ओपनड अप। आई मीन व्हाट आई कैन सी, दिल्ली में भी अभी थोड़े थोड़े करके खोले हैं कि एक ऑटो में एक बंदे को लेके वो जा सकता है, एक टैक्सी में 2 बंदे को लेके आप जा सकते हो ड्राइवर समेत। छोटे छोटे चीज़ें उन्होंने चालू करे, वो अभी देखेंगे। क्योंकि देखो अभी पूरा खोल देने से क्या समस्या है कि कोविड-2 का हो सकता है फिर से वापस सबको इम्पैक्ट हो जाए और फिर हम वापस वही स्थिति में पहुंचे। इसलिए उसको धीरे धीरे वो खोलेंगे और स्थिति को वो टाइटली मॉनिटर कर रहे हैं। इसीलिए अभी देखो आप, रेड ऑरेंज ग्रीन जोन को भी चेंज करके उन्होंने कंटेनमेंट जोन और बेसिकली वार्ड्स में मैप कर दिया है, ताकि वार्ड्स में ही कंट्रोल करते रहे, बाकी वार्ड्स जहाँ पे नहीं है उसको खोल दे, भले ही वो जोन रेड हो, ताकि वो इकोनॉमिक एक्टिविटी कर सकते, लोगों को थोड़ा सुराहा मिले कि उनका डेली का खाना ठीक से मिल जाए और थोड़ा सा आमदनी हो जाए।
ओके सर, थैंक यू सर।
थैंक यू।
Next question is from Akhil. Akhil, please ask your question.
Sir,
Akhil?
sir, his government doesn't have any other main source of revenue rather than opening up liquor shops?
No, obviously. I think tax is the biggest revenue for government. Liquor shop opening is not the revenue for government. They get a tax from the sale of liquor. So similarly, for sale of everything, they get a tax. There is direct tax and indirect tax, and that's through which the government gets its revenue. So that's where it is.
Yes, sir.
Next question is from Sumit. Sumit, please ask your question.
Hello.
Yes, Sumit.
Sir, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
सर मेरा क्वेश्चन है कि जो अभी पीएम मोदी ने मतलब जो स्टेटमेंट दिया था, तो थोड़ा पॉलिटिकल है, लेकिन मैं पूछना चाहता हूँ कि एक आर्थिक सुधार के रूप में सर प्रधानमंत्री मोदी ने बड़े पैमाने पर कार्रवाई वैसे तो किया नहीं है, वैसे उनके संरक्षण में न्यायिक प्रणाली और नागरिक सेवा में कोई सुधार भी नहीं है। तो भारत जो है भ्रष्टाचार की परतों में दबा हुआ है पूरी तरीके से, और तो सर एनपीए वगैरह भी बहुत मतलब कर्जों के पहाड़ में जो मतलब दबे हुए हैं। तो सर जो इन्होंने बोला था कि स्वदेशी भारत को किस मुकाम पर ले जाएगा, इस स्टेटमेंट पे सर कुछ आप कहना चाहेंगे?
मेरे लिए ये कहना कठिन काम है, बट आई थिंक political parties जो वापस, there is an election process through which they come back to power, and there the masses vote believing that things have happened or not happened. So अगर चीजें नहीं हुई तो वोट नहीं मिलेगा और उनको सरकार छोड़नी पड़ेगी, और अगर लोग खुश हैं और उन लोगों को लगते हैं कि शायद सही दिशा में काम हो रही है, तो वो वोट करेंगे और वोट करने से वो पावर में आएंगे। आई थिंक इट्स एट द एंड ऑफ द डे हमारे हाथ में होते हैं, us as means citizen who decide कि कौन सरकार में रहे या ना रहे, और वो काम देख के। तो वो मेरा पर्सनल विचार के थ्रू नहीं होगा, इट्स मोर अ मास व्यू ऑफ सिटीजन्स ऑफ इंडिया, जिसके बेसिस में वो असेस होते हैं। बिकॉज देखो कोई भी काम कोई भी करेगा तो उसका देयर विल बी अ सेट ऑफ पीपल हु विल बी सपोर्टिव और देयर विल बी सम पीपल हु विल बी अगेंस्ट दैट, कॉन्ट्रेरियन व्यू रहेगा, और वो होना भी चाहिए। डेमोक्रेसी में वो होना भी चाहिए कॉन्ट्रेरियन व्यू, तब जाके वी कम आउट एज अ मच मोर स्ट्रॉन्गर डेमोक्रेसी। बट एट द एंड ऑफ द डे आई थिंक द सिटीजन्स डिसाइड, आई मीन दे feel, they perceive, they experience, and then they vote, and it all depends there.
Okay. The next question is from one of the participants. She wants to ask you, which sector of the economy do you think will help in recovering faster?
I would think it is again the MSMEs. MSMEs need to stand up really quick. because they feed into the large corporates with their producers. And then the large corporates will cranking, and that's where the bigger circle will start to actually churn. So I would think the small. So आपके घर के सामने किराना वाला, आपके सामने जो ठेला वाला है, आपके those needs to churn faster and quicker. And once those starts firing, the small scale industries will fire. The workers will be back in the factory. They will do those small scale productions that will feed into the large scale industries actually inputs for their produce. That's how this chain will happen. So I think MSMEs का fire करना बहुत important है.
Okay, next question is from Ayan. Ayan, please ask your question.
Hello, very good afternoon, sir.
Yeah, good afternoon, Ayan.
So my doubt is regarding the the recent financial relief which the government has offered of $265 billion US. So like the economy has created a budget deficit right now, right?
Sorry, फिर से बोलो आप.
Sir, my question is regarding the financial relief the government has recently offered of $265 billion US, right? So currently the economy, the government has created a budget deficit, right? So sir, in the near future, they have to recover it by charging higher tax from us.
It depends, If you look at the Indian tax system, while we brought in GST to standardize it across the states, because we had multiple tax systems. So that's a good step. The effectiveness of the implementation is still a challenge. I think it's still not smoothened. It needs to be smoothened. Second is, if you look at India's population, 1.38 billion,
right, sir,
which is very unfortunate that just 4% of that pay income tax. And
right,
I'm hard to believe that just 4% are in the taxable bracket. There's much more that is there in the tax payable bucket, which do not pay tax, and which makes this 4% to actually pay a large quantum of the tax, income tax. So the tax system should be broad-based. That's one. Second, culturally and heritagely, we have been an economy which is more a cash economy. So we are always cash transactions and believe karte hain. The more we are able to enable digital transactions, which will have audit trails and which will be absolutely transparent, and which also helps in tracking and monitoring, that will bring in a huge amount of discipline, and that will actually widen the tax base, because then because of the transparency that is there, everybody knows ki kisne kitna transaction kara, paise kahan se kahan gaye. All this audit trail will actually help you to understand the income, and at the back end, when you run those analytics, you will know this set of population is actually taxable, but they don't pay tax. Then once you broaden that, that will actually bring in more additional revenue for the government. So I think there is a potential opportunity to broaden the tax base, but reduce the percentage of tax. That will actually help. Today, what is happening in India is you have too many people sitting on the wagon and too few people actually pulling the wagon. It has to be the other way around, where you have many people pulling the wagon and very few people actually sitting in the wagon.
All right, so I'm getting it.
Okay, so the next question is from one of the participants. He wants to ask you, क्या आपको लगता है कि भारत की अर्थव्यवस्था अगले 2 साल में फिर से 5 से 6% की जीडीपी रेट को छू सकती है, या इससे भी ज्यादा समय लगेगा?
If you look at इस साल का अगर आप predictions देखोगे, दुनिया के सब सुपर पावर and all the strongest economy are all showing negative growth this year, with the US showing somewhere around -4%. There are 2 countries which is still showing a positive growth, of which India is one of them. The second one is China. India is showing somewhere around 1.9 to 1.8%, so close to 2% sort of growth, even this year when the economy is struggling significantly, versus China, who is showing somewhere around 4%. So I think the Indian context has a very compelling story and a scenario. And again, I say it is about the intent. If the intent is right of the mechanism through which India runs, the governance through which India runs, if that governance is really very solid, which is consumer savvy, which means best, which does not have biases, and it communicates with the cross section and takes care of the cross section, and there are measures and tools to do that, India is going to bounce back. There is no chance, because this consumer market that you have of 1.8 billion, this is the largest. all global players are coming and setting up operations in India to sell in India because they understand the potential of this market. And we have a very young population. And this population's ability to earn and churn is so much more than some of the other Western matured economies. Today, if you look at an Indian house today, parents working, kids have just joined, see so much of surplus that comes into the family. The family which was earning 100 rupees, today all of a sudden has 200 rupees, 175 rupees, which means the deployable cash to procure and consume has gone up many folds because the families are in that set of status. The parents are working, parents are just retiring, kids have joined in, they are having their income. So that family income becomes so much more. And that's happening even if you look at your migrant laborers and the domestic workers who come to work for you at home. They come here, they earn more, they send it back to their home, they're building their house and things back home. Because there is so much more liquidity in their system, which they were not able to get where they were originally based at. And hence, that is helping their overall family income and the economy. We need to have more of that. That will actually spread and create a more balanced, full sort of economic status across the country. But I think it's actually headed in the right direction. The struggle is the pace. We are moving at a very slow pace. And because of the complexity of our culture, diversity, states, we are a very vast and complex country.
Thank you. The next question from one of the participants is, would there be a labor crisis as workers are returning to their homes? And how do you think we can overcome this?
That's a tough one. That's a tough question. See, I think there are two parts. Emotional part. Today, the migrant laborers, with absolute respect to them, I think they could have been serviced better. That's how I'll put it. They could have been serviced better. There could have been some thoughts put in. How do you ensure that? That has not happened. So there is a bad miss, which is why emotionally they felt disconnected with the cities where they came in to earn their livelihood. And hence they thought of going back to the basis, which is very right. Emotionally, that's how a human being will behave. But as they move in and settle in there, once the emotional quotient gets met, the financial irritations will start happening. And that's where I think they will have to do a return journey back to their workplaces. The question is how much opportunity they will have by that time they come back to their work, and how much will the market be there for their services. I think that's where I still don't have a clear view. But I do think they will have to, because at the end of the day, they will have to have sustenance for their own living. Back home, if it is there, perhaps they will not come back, which I think is not there, which is why they moved in. But because of the emotional challenge, they had to move back or are moving back. But their emotional irritations will start happening in the next few weeks. And that's when they will again have to pack their bags and come back to their workplace. And that breather is essential because, you know, it's also a mental turmoil through which people go through. I mean, we are sitting in houses, getting all our essentials, foods and everything fine. But look at them who's struggling and scratching their head actually to think, रात का खाना मिलेगा नहीं मिलेगा कल का सुबह क्या होगा नहीं होगा बच्चे हैं, all those things are there. The temperature outside is so very severe, and in that sort of a situation, if there is hardly any help coming in or hardly any employment there, so they are emotionally taken back, saying that the city doesn't do or things doesn't do. I've spent so much time here, so they have that emotional challenge, and I think it's good that they're going back home. That will actually help them solve the emotional challenge that they currently have. But I think they will come back.
Thank you. Next question is from Shriya. Shriya, please ask your question.
I think we are not able to unmute her, Bhumika.
Okay, so we'll take the question from Vasu. Vasu, please ask your question.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah, good afternoon, Vasu.
So, sir, my question is that you said that MSME would be the driving factor of India's GDP. But the recent loans, yeah, sir. So, but the recent loan scheme given by the ministry, they are giving loans to MSME worth 3 lakh crore. But the eligibility criteria for that is 100 crore as annual turnover. So sir, my basic question is that how do you think the small businesses will recover when they have nowhere near that much of annual turnover?
I think perhaps you need to check the interpretation once again. What they have said, the MSC category was previously up to 50. Now they have moved it to anybody who does business up to 100 crores, they will be termed as MSMEs. So that's what it's actually giving them more turnover and bringing more businesses into that MSME bucket so that they get the benefit of the financials that the government is offered. It is not about saying only the 100 crore ones will get and the others will not get. The definition of MSME has changed from a bucket that they were, I think they were at 50 crore, up to 50 crores was turnover was MSMEs. Now it has gone to 100 crores. That's the change that they have done.
Okay, sir, I will check it out.
And if I am wrong, please do message me on my LinkedIn and say you were wrong.
Yes.
I'll be happy to correct myself.
Sure, sir.
So the last question to you now is, will the self-reliant policy of India be beneficial as country mainly depends on its imports in the short run?
Self-reliance. I think self-reliance is a good term. It's important to be self-reliant, but I think you cannot disconnect yourself from the global economy. That's my personal belief. The journey that we have envisaged, I don't think there is a U-turn from that standpoint. It's important to be self-reliant, whether we do produce it within our own resources to be self-reliant, or we do a combination of producing it internally and also using the global markets to be self-reliant is always will be a debate, but I think it will be a combination. It will be a hybrid model where you produce and increase your produce to where you were today versus in the next 5 years, are we able to do more of what we were doing? Absolutely, yes, we should do that. But simultaneously, am I going to close the borders and say, no, nothing will come in? I think the answer is no, that has to come in because you need to embrace good things that's happening in the world and build it into your model so that you are much, much more sharper and better as you execute and manufacture and produce. So it will be a combination of both, I think, as part of our self-reliant journey.
Thank you so much, sir, for answering the questions of our participants. I would now like to invite the senior most teacher and the teacher in charge of the department, Ms. Anshu Chopra, to propose a vote of thanks. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, sir, for your very, very informative session. I've been reading the chat all along and I've been getting so many messages that the whole talk, everything was very informative, very knowledgeable for the students as well as the faculty. Thank you so much. And I truly believe in your belief that India will bounce back. I'm also very sure that India is going to come back with very fast and come out of this crisis. And I would now like to propose a formal vote of thanks. I, on behalf of Shivaji College, thank our esteemed guest, Mr. Anirudh Sen, for taking out his precious time to be with us. Thank you so much, sir. I believe whatever you've said today, students are also going to take a note on that and follow experiential learning that you had talked about in your talk. I would also like to thank our principal, Dr. Shiv Kumar Sehdev, for his always constant guide and motivation. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the teachers and the students from other colleges of Delhi University as well as from other universities who have come to attend this webinar. Even though it's a virtual one, it's not a proper seminar that we would be hosting otherwise. I would like to thank my dear colleagues for their constant support in organizing this event. And lastly, I would like to thank all the students of our economics department, especially the office bearers of the economics department who've been working tirelessly to make this event a grand success. Thank you so much, sir, for being with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And absolutely honored, most humbled. And simultaneously, I put this session on my LinkedIn. So if you have questions and things, feel free to reach out and connect. And thank you again very much. Wish you all the very best. Stay safe and God bless.
Thank you, sir.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir. And I request all the participants to please fill up the feedback form so that you would be getting your certificates once you fill up your feedback form. Aarti, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. The link has been posted in the chat box. Filling up the feedback form is mandatory to be eligible for e-certificates.
You can request everybody to leave, the
All the participants can now leave one by one.